everybody, and welcome to tonight's show. Good grief. That nearly didn't happen. Now, unfortunately, tonight, Restream has decided that it doesn't want to talk to YouTube, possibly because it's a new channel and maybe Restream is nervous and, you know, they've got to sit at the table for a couple hours first before someone breaks the ice and that sort of thing. So YouTube commentary is not going to be displayed behind me tonight. It will only be Twitch's, because that hasn't changed. To those of you that are on the YouTube channel, I have that open up here and I can see everybody there. It's not the usual crowd that we get, but that's to be expected as we change things over. And I should possibly put up a little notice on the other YouTube channel. Maybe I should do that quickly. A bit late now, isn't it? Anyway, I'll do it for tomorrow's show, which will be on this channel. So if you're watching on this YouTube channel, that's where it's going to be moving forward. So bear that in mind. Okay, so you might have noticed it is just me, myself, and I, which means you have about 48 personalities sitting here right now, ready to get going. It's the biggest show we've ever done. And so we have a lot of things to get through today. Something that we've got to look at. We've got to decide upon something now. In terms of the world building space and all of that, we've got the 5 lands. Now, just in case you don't remember the 5 lands, there's the website that we've been working on. This is worldanvil.com. And we've been working through making all these wonderful bits and pieces. And now that we've had Demetrius from World Anvil join us last week, he was showing us how to make all these wonderful little links and things. So we started to set up cities and things. Now, we can certainly carry on with that. We've got so many articles that we could write. We also got you to leave comments on these articles. So let me go back here. Stream stuff suggestions. Now, some people have been very active on the stream ideas. I think it was name suggestions, actually. So we've got quite a lot of names that have been dropped down here by a couple of folks, which is brilliant. We can drop those in and use them as we need to. The question is now putting forward to you folk, that's where we are. Demetrius will join us every now and again, well, probably once a month, if not more often, to show us and clean up the mess that is the world that we are creating. I believe Kaora has now got a stream running at this time as well on his Twitch channel. I'm not sure what he's doing there. I think he's drawing maps and things. I could be mistaken. So there is a clash in terms of that now, because I know a lot of people like to watch both. Well, they like to watch Kaora's world building and map drawing stuff as well as to potentially watch this thing. So the question that I am putting to you now, dear viewers, since basically we do this for you guys, and obviously I enjoy doing it, so there is definitely that in the mix. But the question that I put to you is, do we change or move this time slot? Do we move it to a different day, for example? Now, obviously the weekends are the best because that allows people who would normally be working to catch the stream, and would allow those who are not to catch the stream. So there are many options. Why are you still awake, Dead Aussie Gamer? Please go to bed, young man. It is way past your bedtime. Go to bed, Dead Aussie Gamer. Anyway, so do we keep it where it is? Do we carry on? Do we forge ahead? What do we do? It doesn't look like the map is going to get finished anytime soon, because I know that Kaora is incredibly busy with all kinds of things, particularly Project Deos, which I'm very excited about. Demetrius, as Frederick Schmidt has pointed out, did a great job in terms of helping us with world building. Absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed the time that we spent together on last week's stream. Working on this entire site. So we've got lots of options, but shall we stay here? Watcher 2417 suggests we move it an hour earlier. The challenge with an hour earlier is that for some people then it starts to clash with the World Anvil live stream, which I have just been watching. That was very interesting on Cyberpunk. even if you're not interested in cyberpunk, it's always insightful to see what's going on in terms of different genres and what their tropes and ideals and things were. So Janet from World Anvil was interviewing Tobias, one of my friends and a player, and a cyberpunk, I should say. I'll get shot for calling him steampunk. But cyberpunk... fundies. He knows so much about it. He's really an expert on it. It's very interesting to watch. So the time, I think, kind of works for everybody. Now, I know here in the UK, we have had an additional 15 days added on to the isolation. And between you, me, and everybody else who's watching, and I now have no idea. I've got 12 people on YouTube, and I think Twitch is going to win for once. Twitch is going to win for once. I don't know. Let me see. How do I see how many people are watching on Twitch? I actually can't see that number. So I don't know how many people are watching on Twitch. A couple people are watching on Twitch. That's the important thing. 32. Thanks, White Tiger. I don't know why I can't see that. I'm blind, probably not looking in the right place. Anyway, so there we are. All right, Dead Aussie Gamer is going to bed. Good night, Dead Aussie Gamer. He was running a very interesting adventure this morning, actually. His minion quest was quite a lot of fun to watch. They had to make two people fall in love or remember why they were in love and had fallen out of love. It was very touching. Anyway, we need more YouTubers to watch, says Landon. Well, yes, I think a lot of people were expecting it to be on the other channel, the other YouTube channel, but of course we've decided to switch it over. So now all the live stuff is on this channel, all the pre-generated stuff is on the other channel, as it used to be way back when. But then we thought we should consolidate it, and now we're thinking, no, we should separate it again. It's something about moving to the UK. It just causes you to want to do that all the time. Anyway, so there we are. Yes, right. So tonight, the question I put to you is, do we carry on? Do we forge on with the Five Lands? Do you want to do something else? Five Lands has got a lot to get through. We've got a lot to work on tonight if we do that. So putting it to a vote very quickly. Game Master's Vault says chocolate milk cures blindness, so I've heard. Hello, Game Master's Vault. Yes, it does. It does to a large degree, but it's got to be a constant supply. When you run out of it, that's when you die. So there you are. Landon's vote is to continue. White Tiger says question in Five Lands sounds fun. Grizzles is voting for iron pangolins. Absolutely. Love lion. I love lion pangolin. I don't even know what that is. At least make the iron pangolin. I agree. I love that iron pangolin idea. So let's see. Hefe says, let's light up the forge. Totally not biased. Absolutely not biased. Definitely agree with you on that one. Rolls up sleeves. Let's get our hands dirty with lore, says Xander the Green. Absolutely. Let's do that. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's do that, I think. Let's create the Iron Pangolin, something a little different from what we had before, from what we've been doing before. I have been telling everybody, by the way, about the gemstones and this magic idea. I think it is so much fun. And my only regret is that I have a new show that we're going... Well, we did a session 0 yesterday. I did mention this to some of you. And I've got a cover. It's quite interesting. Now, session 0 was very interesting. The challenge is the session 0 is set in a sci-fi campaign. So for the whole of this week, I've been doing science fiction world building, which is very different, I now have come to realize, from fantasy world building. And one of the biggest things, one of the biggest things is, of course, that you're dealing with mega amounts of space. So it becomes quite a challenge. Anyway, let me show you that. I have the image available. I'm going to show it to you because I'm quite excited about it. It's very different to what we normally produce. And the group of role players that we've put together, you know all of them if you've watched my channel for a long time, because they are all friends of mine. We were very lucky to get some in. And this is the cover. You can't see that because it's too big. So let me act like a professional. No, I can't act like a professional for a moment. Never going to happen. Let me resize this and make sure that it fits properly before I do that. So there. So that is the new RPG cover that we're going to be working on. That's going to be on this channel, airing for some time. Science fiction tabletop RPG. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. It's not daunting insofar as world creation. What is daunting is the players yesterday in session 0. They were trying to do everything they could possibly do. And I said to them, the first thing that we have to do is, this is a homebrew sci-fi campaign. I don't want any Star Trek shorthand. I don't want any Star Wars shorthand, because that often creeps in. Because, and people were saying, well, is it because why is science fiction so difficult to role play in? And I think it's that common frame of reference. With fantasy, we know we've got orcs, we've got dwarves. And if I say there's a dwarf, and if I say there's an orc, instantaneously we have a whole bunch of preconceptions. Pointy ears, big beards, gruff and grumbly, whether they're German or Scottish, it doesn't matter, but that's kind of usually where we expect them to come from. Elves are haughty and long-lived. That's about it. But when science fiction comes along, if you say, well, these are chewy-eye, you go, well, what the hell is that? I don't know what that is. So there's a certain barrier to entry. There's a certain sort of level. It's like, whoa. We can't sort of access it. So that's a big challenge. And yesterday we only had one slip up. They were in the session 0. They were trailing a ship, a freighter that had been. It had isodesium added to the engine particulates so that it was leaving a trail that they could follow. And it was interesting. It was interesting. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. Enigma, I know. It was not planned this way, a warp enigma. So I would say choose the one that's the most beneficial to you and go from there. So yeah, which one sort of drives you forward? Okay, so anyway, that's the sci-fi campaign. We can talk a lot more about that. And as I think Landon pointed out, now, please bear in mind, folks, I'm not just looking at one screen tonight. I'm flipping between Twitch and YouTube to try and catch the chat. Because like I said, Restream is only giving me the Twitch stuff. So please bear that in mind. Landon says, or asks the question, what system are you using? We use the Tri-Fi system. So we use the Tri system, which I wrote for the fantasy stuff for Wizards of Konbari. When I put it to a vote to my players, I said, okay, well, what do you guys want to play? They said sci-fi. And I went, waha! There are not a lot of great sci-fi systems out there, and there are not a lot of great sci-fi systems that I particularly enjoy the space element to. Now, if you're doing science fiction, as far as I'm concerned, spaceships. It's about spaceships. We need spaceships. So I needed to do that. So anyway, I have rewritten it, and I will release those rules at some point once we're satisfied with them. Because at the moment, they're very piecemeal. We've taken bits of nautical campaigns, we've taken other bits and pieces to try and cobble together the system, which yesterday we played it. It was working really, really, really cool. White Tiger 225, it entails mecha giant robots. I was a huge fan of, and the name's gone completely out of my head, Battletech. With giant robots and big mecha and fast mecha and slow mecha. Anyway, so that's where we are. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Let's now turn our attention. Let's focus here, because really we have no excuse not to. Let's focus and go to World Anvil. And in World Anvil, we're going to create our Iron Pangolin. We've got a couple of options here in terms of how we want to build this creature. And Are we or are we not in agreement that a D&D base would be the best option, or do we leave it generic so there isn't a D&D option? You tell me, and then we will add it, because we have to add it as a potential plugin here, and I will have to remember where to do that, because of course Demetrius is not here to help me tonight. But I do know that we just we do the configuration thing, as far as I'm aware. So you tell me, do you want this to be a D&D based pangolin, iron pangolin, or do we kind of leave it generic? Leave it generic. Landon's vote is for D&D. Warp Enigma says leave it open, but I do like D&D. Matthew Downs says focus cupcakes. Cupcakes? You have cupcakes? And you're not sharing with us? Lance Pickett says generic. Michael Beale says 5th edition. Let's see, what is Twitch saying? Pathfinder says Michael Downs. Well, Pathfinder 1, maybe. Twitch seems to be leaning towards generic, with Hickory Prick and Grizzles saying generic. I'd say generic. So far we are about 5 D&Ds to... I don't like D&D, but it sells better. So D&D says Frederick Schmidt. Past tense, the cupcakes have gone. Damn. I like those cupcakes. Well, I would like cupcakes. Let's put it that way. Okay. A lot of people saying keep it generic. Okay. So then we're going to keep it generic. Let's keep it generic. I think... Yeah, let's keep it generic. Okay, we're going to keep it generic. That makes my life easier. I will not argue on that one. We're going to go to create here. And there was a species tab. Okay, so we're going to go into the species. Now, iron pangolin. Iron pangolin. Now, okay, let me rephrase. So Michael Beale's like, I'm running a 5th edition game now and I want to steal stuff. Absolutely. Well, we can do that. Don't panic. Don't panic. You can absolutely translate this across. All we won't be doing is the actual stats, but that's fine. You can use them as you so choose. So we need a name for this iron pangolin, and I think the names that were given to us were mainly for cities, and I don't blame anyone because that's what we were doing at the time. So Warp Enigma has been very busy, which is brilliant. So Demoka Shear is lovely name. Tabai Neck, Marches, Jimmy James just went for a whole bunch of stuff. Now, the iron pangolin most likely will have a variety of different names, and we can sort of think about which way we want to go in terms of, does it have multiple names or just a singular name? A singular name is always going to be easier. Players will always remember a single name. They're not going to remember a whole bunch of them. Jimmy James says Elam Ezettel Zocco or Koko, I suppose. Zaman Ek Ixkaknab Ozomatl Yolotli Notchli. Yeah, not sure. Not sure. Matthew Downs is making virtual muffins. So as long as they're not bran muffins are only nice when they're really fresh, right? And you can put butter on them and the butter starts to melt. That's when a bran muffin is nice. When it's not nice is when you can actually use it to crack walls and things with. That's when it's too far. An Opalawi. Opalawi is the suggestion for the name of this pangolin. So, yeah, look, I mean, these suggestions here, by the way, were made out of context in terms of what we were looking for. So we're looking for the name of this pangolin. It doesn't have to be from this particular list. So we need to decide upon that. Now, I'm not seeing Twitch's suggestions. Let me go there quickly. Sammy Critfiddle, thank you so much for that subscription. You've been a subscriber for 3 months. That's brilliant. That's very kind of you. Thank you for staying with us. we continue to try and make sure that your faith in us is warranted. It's called Gerald, says Ed R. Andrew. Slyphis or Sylphis, says White Tiger. I know my players. They'll change Sylphis into something a bit dangerous. It is in the Feros Badlands, so when Trey suggests Feros, it's not a bad one, absolutely. It is not a bad suggestion. So there we are. So Feros... what about a ferret? No, that's a real animal. A paddlewa. A paddlewa, says Xander the Green. Zordencore, says Landon. Might be a little bit complicated. The paddlewa is quite cool. Letamago, says Carl Volmerans. A Letamago. That's interesting. That's interesting. An Easterfark, ne? Meneer Volmerans. An Easterfark. A Ganpullen. A Ganpullen, says Laralee Nelson. A Letamago. I kind of like the name Letamago. I don't know why. It kind of sits well, I think. I think we're going to go with Letamago. Some people are going for the Ganpullen, but I think Letamago. I'm going to call it a Letamago. How the hell to spell it? Letamago. Letamago. Iron pangolin. So there we go. Oh, you are kidding me, Carl Volmerans. A letter... How on... Letamago... How would you say that in Afrikaans? I have no idea. I have no idea how you would actually pronounce that. Letamago. Letamago. Really? You know, you live in a country for 36 years. You supposedly learn the language for 12 years while in high school. Clearly, I did not learn it well enough. All right, well, that's what it is. It is. There we go. We will keep Afrikaans alive for another 10 minutes as we call our iron pangolin a Letamago, which is officially the name of a pangolin in Afrikaans, which is a derivative of Dutch. And so there we go. It's a lovely, expressive language, I find. Anyway, all right, so we have our Letamago, the iron pangolin. Now, we don't have a huge amount of information about this iron pangolin at all in terms of much. There's very little description. So the question that has been asked by Kayetan98 is, what is the iron pangolin? Well, the iron pangolin comes from this territory here. Let me go back here and let's go to this map down here, and we're going to zoom out a little bit. And the iron pangolin comes from the Feros Badlands. This is a territory of hard, red, iron-based rock that separates our Gakota kingdom, or majocracy, our Gakota majocracy, from the area down here, which is controlled by the quadrupeds, the ungulates, the very dangerous centaurian moose folk things. The iron pangolins ramble around these iron territories hunting stuff. Now, we never got further really than that in terms of describing it. So this is our opportunity now to really, really give it some impact in terms of describing it. Now, I don't know, are there any artists in there? Are there any artists in chat at the moment? I must say that YouTube is now at 22 people watching. YouTube is now at 22 people watching. And Twitch is still at an unknown number of people watching. So there we are. But nonetheless, I mean, 30 people. Okay, there we go. 30 people watching there. So there we go. Right, now, White Tiger 225 off the bat has said something which I think is absolutely wonderful. I'm literally copying and pasting it because I think that's a brilliant idea. Xander the Green has asked the question, what would it eat? I'd imagine it being an insectivore, yes. However, Xander the Green, White Tiger precipitated your question with the suggestion that to replenish its scales, it eats iron. So I would say let's combine the two together. Generally, insectivore. Okay, insectivore. Why doesn't it like insectivore? What is the official name for something that eats? Oh, it's capitalized. Sorry. Generally insectivore, however. Oops. Stop that. To replenish its scales, it eats iron oxide found in the rocks in its domain. Okay. Now, when we're designing a monster, we've got to look for a couple of things, and I've said this before, so I'm hoping it's not too much for you. But when we are talking about monsters or animals, we need to define why are we putting it there? What are we going to put it there for? What is its use going to be? So when we're talking about something like perhaps an iron pangolin, the Letamago, for example, is it something that is there for flavor, or is it something there that will have an actual purpose? Now, we don't want it to be sentient because we've got a whole bunch of sentient things running around. We want it to provide, yes, the Letamagos, watch out for them because they eat iron and they will sniff out your swords and your plate mail and they will do that. Now, there is already a creature that does that in 5th edition, which is a rust monster. So there's that. There's the carrion crawlers. This other suggestion I see is the bullet, yes, which is the land shark bear thing. So there are a couple of things going on there. Xander the Green says, what would it eat? I imagine it being an insect. Oh, sorry, I've already answered that one. Well, we've sort of got there already. Can this animal dig? I know next to nothing about pangolins. Well, there's another very valid point that Warp Enigma brings up. Pangolins, what's up with them? What do they do? What do they eat? From my experience, they dig in termite holes and burrows and things and eat lots of ants, very much like an aardvark or the, what's the big one? Giant pangolin, which is hairy. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. This one we're talking, it's an armadillo. So let me see if I can just bring up some info on that. It is always useful going to go and have a look at pangolins. They are possibly the second most adorable animal on Earth. There are some pangolins there. They're absolutely gorgeous. And look at that. They carry the baby on the back. It's just so kawaii. I mean, it's really, 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 really cute animal. But then you start to get these dramatic pictures where you go, well, actually, no, that's quite terrifying. That's quite terrifying. That heavy armor plating. They've got massive foreclaws, definitely a burrower or a digger in terms of it goes in and tries to dig stuff out. So just a very heavily armored little creature. A very, very heavily armored creature. So something to bear in mind. It's always useful going to go and do research on this sort of thing. Let me just bring up the other one. Usually this is the first word in an English dictionary, by the way, aardvark. That's the aardvark, which is, again, Afrikaans for earth pig, because it burrows in the earth. Similar type of creature, long snout, big front digging claws. So they're sharing in the same territory. But this one's ugly cute. It's fugly, really. I mean, it's not going to win any prizes for being gorgeous like the pangolin. Now, there's the anteater, the giant anteater, which I was talking about before, which is big and hairy. I mean, there's obviously a niche space here in our environment for creatures that have got long noses, no relation to tapirs, but have got long noses. I mean, this guy just wanders around, the anteater. Truly spectacular. Also, just ripping open stuff. Not the brightest button by the looks of things. I mean, that's not a face that's going to be screaming vast amounts of intelligence. in my opinion. You know, so definitely something that one wants to. Yeah, I wouldn't say he's particularly smart. Look, I mean, his cousin is not going to win any prizes either. But there we go. I mean, enough insulting. I mean, I don't think, you know. Yes. So, right. So that's the space that we're playing in. So yeah, let's think about this. So lots of suggestions coming through on YouTube. Let's go and have a look and see what's happening on Twitch. You're a wizard, Harry. Yeah, absolutely, Harry. Yeah, it's sort of like a giant armadillo is a good point there. Biggs 35. Yep, without a doubt. The pangolin scales were sometimes used in armor. Absolutely. Maybe the same thing happens to our poor pangolin. Okay, I like that. The scales of the Lettermago can be used to make scale mail that is particularly light, but as strong as its metal counterpart. Okay, so there's an advantage, right? So it's potentially a huntable. What have I done? Why did it all go red? I just spell checked it and now it's all gone red. Anyway, okay, it's red now. I don't know why. You see what happens? Demetrius takes one night off because he's been talking for so long. Anyway, all right. So now, right. Okay, let's see. Where are we? Back to the iron. The rustback could be the name of the older Lettermago, or even an alpha male, female, since its scales rust with age. I do like that as well. I do like that as well. So let's do that. A rustback is an alpha. Why don't we make it alpha female that leads a pack of Lettermago? The name is because the scales on her back oxidize and turn a rust red color. Okay, I'll use both language spellings there. Right. Okay. Watcher 2417 says, do the iron pangolin have a weakness for cold due to the tundra in the south? I don't know if they would necessarily have a weakness. I just think that they would avoid it. Again, when we're looking at animals generally will go where their food sources are. They're not going to go wandering out unnecessarily. The only time that animals really leave their main area is if they're forced out due to competition. So in this case, if one rustback is thrown out of her pack because there's another rustback that's grown up and is just a little bit stronger, or however we're going to do that whole thing, she goes wandering off to try and find her own territory. And so she then might move further south, or she might move further north. Unfortunately, in the natural world, what will most likely happen is if she heads south and they can't adapt to the cold, she will probably starve to death. And that will be the end of the line. It is unlikely that she will go south, find a massive amount of food there, and then suddenly reproduce and start up a whole new colony there. The only time that has really happened in our environment, in the world that we know of, as far as I know anyway, is when man has introduced animals to a new territory. So, for example, cattle to Africa, the rats to Madagascar, rabbits to Australia. When we have introduced foreign species into those environments and they have excelled in those environments, they then reproduce en masse. We know that very much. At the same time, when we introduce a certain animal species to environments where they are not good at excelling, they simply don't survive and they die out. They become weak and sickly and the genetic line collapses. So, you know, it's an interesting one. As Laura Bones points out, mongooses or mongoose to the Caribbean. Mongooses were introduced to the Caribbean. Why on earth would they introduce mongoose to the Caribbean? It's an interesting one. You can let me know on that one when we come back to this. So, and again, I mean, we might think that this is What does this have to do with world building? What does this have to do with creatures? These kinds of conversations where you're following this trail, you're building up an image in your head of the species. All of this stuff is useful to have. Now, I will be the first person to raise my hand and say that you don't write down maybe 50% of it. But if it can just sit in the back of your head when you're then role-playing, you can then just throw out this stuff as you go and then come back here, which reminds me, you can then come back to wherever your notes are, World Anvil, etc., etc. You can come back here and add to it. So don't do that. Snakes in the Caribbean. Okay, well, yes, mongoose are particularly good at fighting snakes. So there we are. I can see in YouTube there was yes. I mean I was being particularly snarky, I suppose. I love that word, snarky, which I don't know if it's an international word, actually. Snarky. It means to be basically bitchy, but at the same time slightly funny because the comment is actually true, but you don't have to say it out loud, but you did. But anyway. Matthew Downs quotes Wiki, to replace the act of chewing, the pangolin's stomach is muscular with keratinous spines that project into the interior and contain stones to mash and grind prey, similar to a bird's gizzard. It has teeth in its stomach. That's what that is basically saying, but in a nice way. It doesn't have teeth in its mouth, it has teeth in its stomach. I think that's terrifying. Can we use that? Can we use that? It's an interesting one. He goes on to say that their tongues are longer than their bodies. Okay, there are a couple animals that are like that. Warp Enigma says, what do you hunt them with if they have scale mail as their armor? That's another excellent question. That is another excellent question. A local term for the old female might be a red ruddy. I like that. The rustback. A red ruddy, a rusty. I think we can come up with a couple terms for that. That could be quite fun. You generally don't want to introduce species that can survive in an environment that is strong because then they will unbalance and destroy the ecosystem. Absolutely, Durican. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Cane toads in Australia is another example. Yes, absolutely. Right. A question, will it have any natural predators in the desert or will it be apex? Well, we still need to go back. We still need to go back to some other stuff. And looking in Twitch, there's some brilliant suggestions here as well. One being that they could roll up into an armored ball and then that would allow them to have massive movement. We could certainly look at that. You hunt them with magnets, says Watcher2417. Now that raises a very horrific image in my mind of these traps that are just magnetic and then the poor thing can't get away from that. I mean, trapping is horrid unless you have to do it for survival. Big35 says that this could be a mix between an armadillo and an ankylosaurus or an ankylosaurus. The dinosaur, the big heavy tank-like dinosaur. I don't see why not. It's brilliant. It's interesting though when you bring that up. It is interesting, though, when you bring that up. In terms of saying the ankylosaurus, when we think of an ankylosaurus, it weighs a ton, 1 metric ton, 2,000 pounds. Its tail is a collection of bone that can shatter, well, it would break us in half. I mean, it wouldn't split us in half, but it would break everything that we have inside of us. It is a massive herbivore. An armadillo is not a big animal, it's an insectivore, absolutely. Look at the difference when you add both of those to your campaign setting. You're suddenly going, okay, well, here's something that is a food source. Here is something that is it's so heavily armored. In order for it to be a food source, you would have to have eaten everything else because it's going to be so difficult to overcome and to defeat. It's not worth the time. So with our letter Mago, we need to understand where do we sit on that scale. We still haven't answered that question. What do they fulfill in our campaign space? What role do they fulfill in our campaign space? To give you some examples, they could be a transportation system. So a good example would be from the Dark Crystal. The Skeksis carriage has those bed mites that roll themselves forward, induced, well, they're induced to roll by an electric current, which shocks them into rolling. We could do something similar to that if we wanted to, or they could just be heavily armored mounts. This could work really well. One of the big problems that you have, and this doesn't matter what system you're playing in, and that was a big problem in real life too, was that if you took out the mount, the rider suddenly lost most of their effective combat ability. Of course, taking out the mount was quite tricky because they're usually quite hardy creatures, and we had all sorts of barding to protect them. Here is a mount that has barding already. So it could be a mount. If we make them quite big, they could be a mount. Would they travel very quickly? I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Nothing is going to kill that thing. So it could be food. It could be a mount. They could be a predator. It doesn't have to be an insectivore. Or it could be an insectivore, but much like many other large animals, it might be perhaps omnivorous. That giant tongue of it could very well be an attack option, or if it eats iron, as we have said that it will do, if it detects iron on the wind, but pure iron, as might be found in armor, then that might bring a whole bunch of them to coming to try and find out where this pure iron is from, and then they will try and eat it. So they become predatorial and a danger to the party without actually trying to attack the party. So that raises an interesting ethical question. The creature is not trying to eat you. It is simply trying to dissolve the iron on its tongue to get it into its giant stomach, which is filled with teeth, which will slowly grind down that iron into the iron dust that it needs to have in order to be able to eat whatever's going on. So that's the third option it could be. It could also then just be for flavor. I'm not talking food flavor. I'm talking as you are walking through the Feros Badlands, you spot in the distance a herd of Letamago, slowly making their way towards another termite mound in order to completely consume it and decimate it. Their armor is so heavy that hunting them is an absolute chore, and it's easier to go and hunt the giant rust frogs that live in the lakes over there, or so I think we need to decide firstly where it fits, and that depends entirely on our campaign. If the campaign you're going to be using or setting is quite survival oriented, then making them an aggressive species is a brilliant idea. It's a lovely idea that they hunt down this stuff. We would be replacing rust monsters though, which are traditionally underdark, so this could be quite fun from that perspective. So you guys let me know, of those four functions, food, mount, predator, or flavor, which of the four would you prefer this to be? Because once we've decided on that, that will then determine a whole lot of things that we add in. It will also determine a whole lot of information that we need to include or exclude. And that's one of the critical things. I watch all of these streams on how do we world build and how much writing do we need to do, how far do we need to go, and I mean we always have lots of answers. I mean that's theoretically why we're here. For me, it boils down to how is it going to be used in our game, and that determines how much information we add. So yeah, let's see what is being voted for. White Tiger says flavor. Grizzle says they are animals, I think, or is he catching someone up? I'm not sure. No, they're just animals as far as we're concerned. I mean, they could make a nice companion. Yeah, but flavor is good. White Tiger says flavor. Grizzle says flavor. Let's go and see what YouTube is saying. We got mount, we got food, we have resource, which I think is basically food. Food says Warp Enigma. Foods, that's the same person. Oh dear, Matthew Downs. Oh dear. Okay, you owe us all some muffins for your statement. Matthew Downs writes, they are ferocious, as in iron, ferocious. It's a lovely joke. It's an absolutely lovely joke. I'm laughing inside so much right now. No, it's actually, it's pretty sharp. 5 points to you. I do like that. Okay. Resource and food is what I'm seeing a lot of. I know it's Nicholas Moro in YouTube just saying it's food and a resource. It's food and a resource and amount. It's food and a resource and amount. 1 vote for Predator from the Walsman. Flavor says Biggs. White Tiger agrees. Okay. It's basically going to be flavor. So it is something that we will describe to our players. They're not necessarily going to interact with it. We do like the idea that they are a resource. So that's an interesting one. That gives us some opportunities in terms of what we're going to add to this little guy. Right. So Matthew Downs asked, where do you cash in your points? You cash in your points at your local GM. So find a GM, start playing with them, and cash in your points with them. Tell them that you have been authorized to spend 5 points based on your interaction. So you can spend those 5 points however you like in whatever system you're using. Just make sure that they don't count for anything. So we're going to make a survivalist flavor thing. That means we need a couple of things. So we're going to leave this for now. We've got some stuff there. Right. I think there was something in here that we could fill in. We'll come back to that. Perception and extrasensory capabilities. I think we all like the idea that they have a good scent for iron. I feel like that's so boring, though. Not that they have a scent for iron. I like the fact that they can detect iron. I just feel that the way they detect it. What if? Hear me out. What if their tongue was magnetic? And so, like a snake which puts its tongue out to do a whole bunch of stuff other than pull a tongue at you, when an iron pangolin, when a Lettermago puts its tongue out, it's to sense the microscopic magnetic interference that fresh iron has as opposed to older iron. I have no idea how we would use that. But what do you think of a magnetic tongue? Because again, we've got the iron scales, which are useful for making scale mail. But maybe the magnetic tongue is used in, or could be used to make a compass, so you don't get lost. So you could make a compass out of it. You could do something along those lines. So White Tiger seems very excited about the magnetic tongue. Let's see. They eat iron. They're incorporated in their scales. They'd be able to expand their territory due to humans once the Iron Age starts. Yes, absolutely, Derrican. Absolutely. Ben Nicholson says, okay, I like it. There we are. Good. Right. Excellent. Okay. That's what we're going to do. So, under perception and extrasensory capabilities, the tongue is magnetic and can detect the minute magnetic fields generated by iron, higher grade ions, iron and alloys generate subtle but noticeable different signatures. Okay. And the tongue can be used to make an infallible, because it's fancy, right? An infallible compass needle, right? And is one of the base components for an immovable rod. I like immovable rods. They're really versatile. So there we go. Right. We're not on genetics. We're not on growth rate. We are not there yet. Biological cycle. No. So that's fine there. Extended. We were going to enter the fact that they were what? Food. Wait. Huh? Food. Oh, my brain. Food. They're food. Okay, so that was what could be made out of them. We don't need any of that. We're going to come to that. Uses. I knew it was here somewhere. Right. The meat of the Lettermago is succulent and juicy, but has a strong iron flavor to it. It is something of a delicacy, as getting to the flesh is often very difficult. All right. Was there anything else we wanted to add? The animal must have a great sense of natural direction and could be tamed as navigating pets to help people across the desert without getting lost. I do like that, so we're going to add that in very quickly. Due to the animal's natural affinity for magnetic fields, it makes an excellent guide through the Badlands, through the Feroz Badlands. Okay, there was a habitat somewhere, I'm sure of it. Geographic distribution, the Feroz Badlands. Lettermago, however, have been drawn to... Oh, did we give a name to this place? Wrong map. Did we give a name to the lower... I think we did. Warhearth Tanlau. To Warhearth Tanlau. Due to the presence of so much refined iron, making them a pest. Okay. Michael Beale thinks that it would produce sulfuric acid to digest the iron. Yeah, I could go with that. Its stomach is lined with teeth and produces a very high grade sulfuric acid. Now, I mean, all stomachs produce acid. We know that. That's why you have acid reflux or heartburn or whatever you want to call it. This, I think, would just be in a very high concentration. So, again, byproducts and uses. It's good for us to know that these are things, because again, it is used as a guide for us. So, domestication, we said it could be kept as a pet. What if its liver is used as a curative for potent poisons? Well, again, I mean, we've got three things here. Well, there's obviously the meat, there's the tongue, and now there's the sulfuric acid, which is very good. Now, Jimmy James raises an interesting point. Before I get to Jimmy James's point, let me just check here on Twitch. We're designing traps to capture the Lettermago. So there you are. Their meat is actually the reason many tribes' teeth wear down so quickly, because of the iron particles in their flesh, says White Tiger 225. That's not a joke. The Egyptians, especially in the ancient periods, had difficulty with their teeth because the sand kept getting into all the bread that they used to eat. So their teeth were often ground down by that. Which, so that's not entirely implausible. And of course then, yes, as Grizzles points out, the scales can be turned into excellent scale mail. Right. And domestication, we said the smaller and younger Lettermago can be trained to find metals of a specific type. I don't see why not. I don't see why not. And type can be used as guides through the Feroz Badlands. So that's quite fun as well. We keep forgetting it has scales. Yep, the scale armor. Absolutely. The social structure we don't really have to go into. This would become pure flavor. So from a gaming perspective, we could put something in here that it lives in herds. We know that it is a matriarchal grouping. What's the collective noun? What's the collective noun for Letamago? For I don't even know what the collective noun is for pangolins. I'd say probably a scale of pangolins. So could we say a scale of Letamago goes wandering past? A plink of Letamago. I like plink. A plink of Letamago could certainly be useful there. Carl Volmerans is getting complicated. He's talking about electrolysis to purify raw iron in their stomach, give them some electric powers. We could do that if we need. I mean, we've got so many things that's already happening here. The collective noun for pangolins is, well, for Letamago anyway, a storm. A group could be called a tinkle, says De Krishka. Hello, welcome to the stream. Glad you found us. So maybe before the Iron Age, their liver was used to create a poison, but once the Iron Age began, it was then used to harvest pure iron. It could be a chain. Oh, I like the idea of a chain of Letamago. That's quite a nice symbol. A pack says Kayetan 98. Could be. I'm liking both options. I really am. A grunt. I think chain's going to win it. I think chain is going to win it. A chain of Letamago. I like that. So there we go. Tomago group would be a Potago. Yes, indeed. So the basic coloring would be what? A dusty brown, slowly turning to a rust red as the creature ages. Okay, we like that. We don't have to go into any of this too much unless we want to remind ourselves the average length of one of these. What's the average length of one of these? Maybe 4 foot, 5 foot? I mean, are they gigantic? Again, it comes back to that whole question of what was their function. They are just for flavor. So we could either make these 2 or 3 feet in length, in which case, are they very dangerous? Or we could make them 6 to 7 feet, in which case they are dangerous. Something to think about. 20 feet, says Xander the Green. That would put them in the gigantic scale, making them absolutely terrifying. It would also mean that they become very valuable as mounts if they can be domesticated, which is a whole different kettle of fish altogether. So I've got 2.5 meters there, 1.3 meters, 8 feet. Yeah. Wait a minute. Warp Enigma's watching on both channels. I get you. You vote on both channels. Yes. Cunning. Very cunning. Very cunning. All right. I think we're going to go with, let's call it 5 feet. 5 feet. We'll split the difference. We'll call it 5 feet. Splitting the difference, by the way, is the worst negotiation tactic you can ever use. So we're going to say it's about 5 foot in length for a mature female, 4 foot for the males. And newborns are about the newborns fit in the hand, fit in a hand, a human hand, because we've got to remember that that's where we are. Right. Weight, we don't have to worry about. We don't have to worry about. We don't have to worry about. Biological traits, we're not particularly worried about. We know that it's not sentient. It has no sapience. So I think we are pretty much there. We don't have to worry about that. Blah, blah, blah. Not useful to us at the moment. This is hugely useful, by the way, for a whole bunch of other of the creatures that we could have made, but we don't need to. We don't need to. So the last thing that we need to do, really, is to give it a little bit of description. A little bit of description. Yeah, 4 foot is still huge. It's still a big creature. I mean, you think about 4 foot. What's that? So that's a foot. So 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, that's just over a meter anyway. It's huge. It's very, 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 very big. So very dangerous. So these are. Come now. Large scale covered insectivores that roam the Feroz Badlands, generally in small groups known as chains. These chains hunt insects and metal oxides, brown in color. They are usually not dangerous and generally do not pose a threat to humanoids. They will, however, be drawn to to metal alloys. The purer, the better, and can become dangerous if allowed to swarm over the wearer of the metal. Okay, something along those lines. I mean, that's enough for us to know what's going on. It sort of fills in the gaps, and there we go. There we go. Right, let's see. Where are we now in terms of the different chats? I always get lost when someone uses feet. Meters are more natural to me. Let's not even start that debate. I grew up in a country where feet and inches and miles didn't even exist. We were completely on the metric. And I learned all my feet and inches and that sort of thing because of playing Dungeons and Dragons, as a matter of fact. I had to figure out what was a 10-foot room. Oh, 3 meters by 3 meters. Okay, it's a pretty sizable room. Then I moved to Japan, and everything there is metric, but in Japanese, so that didn't really help me. And then I get to the UK, which is supposedly metric, but completely not metric. They have miles, and forget about kilograms. I learned kilograms to pounds. I learned my conversions there. In the UK, they've got stone. And you're like, why do we have all of these different things? Why? Anyway, it keeps life interesting. That's why, and allows us to go and learn and figure out just what is going on and sort of get there. It stimulates the mind. It stimulates the mind. Okay, so there we have our Letamago, our iron pangolin. I think that's super cool. I think the thing that would be useful would be to have some kind of illustration in this case, because it is for flavor only. It is not something that we need to spend a huge amount of time on. I would say that we can happily call this now done. I just want to make sure that when Demetrius does join us again, he doesn't shout at me for putting this in the wrong place. So this is definitely under fauna and flora. So I'm just going to grab this quickly and put it down there. So there we go. The Letamago iron pangolin species has now been added. Oh, I see I have made these drafts. Give me a second here. I will just undraft them so that everyone can read them in all of their glory. We haven't filled in anything on the main race. So there we are. Okay, now, getting slightly ahead of me is Watcher2417, who asked the very good question. I beg your pardon. Asked the very good question: do Lettermago actually have natural enemies or a short lifespan? If not, they would not give too many because of all of the food. So, in other words, what keeps the numbers of Lettermago down? What keeps the numbers down? What hunts Lettermago? Now, let me be emphatic here. If it exists because of natural evolution, something exists to hunt it. That's just how it works. Something exists out there that will prey upon the Lettermago and their slowness. It could be a microbe. It could be a very small little organism. It could be anywhere. It could be a gigantic monster like T-Rex thing that prowls the Pharos Badlands and eats these things. It just swallows the whole ball. And it has 4 or 5 of these inside of it at any one time, which slowly are dissolved. Or it has teeth inside of its stomach, because that's a really cool idea. It could not be otters, Watcher 2417. So it could not be otters, right? It could be anything except otters. Now, we have not got into what could prey upon these things. I think whilst we're still on the pangolin notion, on the Lettermago idea, we could sort out its predator. What hunts it? So let's go on a vote for that. Do we want to do something that hunts it? Do we want to do more monster creation, more creature creation? Or do we want to go somewhere else? We've got so much more to talk about. We've got the crown of the High Arbiter. We've got the actual landmarks, the cities to go and describe, the war hearths. We've got a lot to do before we could consider ourselves in a happy place. The gemstones, for example, the Gakota war paint. There is stuff. There is lots of stuff. So you guys decide on what you want to do. So yeah, think about it. Whilst we do think about it, domestication of an animal. It's quite interesting. I find it interesting. There are 5 criterion that an animal has to have in order for it to be domesticable. 5. And if it doesn't have all 5, it can't be domesticated. It's a very interesting quirk of nature. Well, there's some that it doesn't have to have, but that we like them to have as human beings. And if they don't have them, we'll try and breed it into them. But there are 5 traits, and I can remember some of them. One is herd mentality. It's very difficult to domesticate individualistic animals that have territories and will fight over that. Hence the fact that we don't have a large amount of, say, tiger prides running around, although I do know that in the current context that is something of a little bit of a blasphemy, and I have not watched that series yet. But generally speaking, individual animals are very difficult to domesticate. And as a result, it makes it more energy to actually domesticate it than it would be to domesticate something that likes to stick in herds. So herd mentality is very good. A non-aggressive herd mentality is required. And what do I mean by that? So cattle, for example, and by the way, guys, if you want me to stop talking about this stuff, just say so, because I know I tend to go off on a very wild and random direction. So, non-aggressive herd mentality. When a bunch of sheep or a bunch of cows get threatened by something, they form a protective circle around the things that are precious to them. So usually it's the young. They form a protective circle, but that's where they stay. Rhinoceros, on the other hand, A, apart from not being herd animals, but B, when they are threatened, they charge. The African buffalo is another example of an animal. It's a bovine. It's the same family as cattle, but they charge when threatened. They don't stand back. So that makes it really difficult in order to be able to manage the herd if they attack. So it's definitely a herd that needs to have that. They need to produce something of significant value quickly. So that's one that we can add in over time. Now, if you think about sheep produce wool very, very quickly. They have the ability to regrow as much wool as you took off of them last year within the space of a year, if not sooner. Cattle reach maturity very, very, very quickly. Elephants take too long to get to the point where you can then cull the elephant and eat it. It just takes too long, and it takes too much resources. That's the next one. It takes too many resources to get to that scale in order for us to be able to use it. So there's lots of things that go into this entire idea of animal type of mentality. And then the other one is that they stick together. They stick together. So it's still part of the herd idea, but generally speaking, when you are moving the animals or when you corral them, when you put them into one place, they stay together. And that's the important thing. If they drift out over massive areas, it becomes very, very, very problematic. So if you are ever on the African continent and you come across some young lad sitting under a tree watching a herd of cattle, the cattle aren't going to just disperse into the distance. Cattle will stay relatively close together, but they will stay together with an eyesight because otherwise they run the risk of being eaten. So there's lots of things that go into making something domesticatable or not. And that's why we have so few of them as well, by the way. We don't have a lot of domesticated animals in comparison to the number of animals that the natural kingdom has. But that's a complete random. Breedability, well, that kind of goes back with the food. So they've got to be able to breed really, really easily and grow very, very quickly. So pandas are a great example. They're very fussy breeders, very, very, very fussy breeders. They take a long time to breed, whereas with horses and with cattle and with sheep, most of the ones that we domesticate, it's very easy to breed them. So there you are. Right, now there was something that was mentioned. It was mentioned by Jimmy James, I think. It was mentioned by Jimmy James. Now, Jimmy James... so Grizzles raises the question about house cats. It's an interesting one. It really is an interesting one because it is a creature that has managed to enchant us by its indifference. I personally believe it's more of a sociological attachment that we have with cats than anything else. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of cats. The house I live in has 3 cats. Those cats are affectionate when they want to be and not affectionate when they don't want to be. They're very, very indifferent. And I think that that's why we like them. It's because if the cat likes us, we're like, ha ha, I have been blessed by the great Bastet herself. She has sent down this mangy, manky creature, this horrific effigy of hatred and contempt, and it has chosen me to... Okay, it scratched me and has now moved away because I was gushing too much. No, it's my fault that you're a horrid animal. Yeah, no. So, cats, I think, is because they are so disdainful of us and we seek approval that when we get it from them, we want to have them around. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, we're not gonna go down that dark one. Back to what Jimmy James was talking about. Jimmy James was talking about dung. Dung is incredibly interesting. The droppings of animals is very, very, very interesting. And the fact that it is so vital to our survival as a species on this planet, we should be obsessed with this stuff. So here are some interesting facts about excrement, as difficult as it might be. And I hope that none of you are having dinner at this particular moment in time, but the excrement of whales is fed upon by plankton, which the whales feed upon, and plankton produces more oxygen than any other thing on the planet, and that's kind of what helps our oxygen cycles, is the creatures that live off of the dung of the whales. Now, coprolites we know of. Coprolites are dinosaur dung, which are still to this day ground up and used as aphrodisiacs in certain cultures, but which had and were believed to have a lot of medicinal powers. They don't. I mean, it's rock, but then that's beside the point. So this great cycle, this roundabout thing, when we look at dung as a problem in society, it is often stuff that we don't look at, but that we should, because it creates some very interesting problems. Like, for example, London. London was in a terrible state, most of Europe was, when they decided to have giant cities but no sewer system. The Romans had sewers because they realized big civilizations needed to have it. As game masters, we need sewers for our players to go in to fight the giant mutated crocodiles or bullywogs or whatever you want to put in those sewers. But they only come about when you are sophisticated enough to actually install them. An army on the move, digging trench lines for the soldiers to use as their ablution facilities, is absolutely vital. So it's a horrific subject from one sense. From another sense, it's very interesting in world building. So the dung of this particular creature, the letter Mago, it would have certain properties, and I guarantee you there would be little insects that would make use of that. Is the dung going to be magnetic? Is it not going to be? Is it going to be, perhaps it contains very pure, I don't know what. Iron breaks down inside of its stomach, we know that. So its excreta perhaps is very good at sharpening blades. So when we look at what we used to use when we wanted to make leather soft, we used to use dog feces because it contained such a high amount of uric acid, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. And we used to use urine for that exact reason as well. But particularly dog feces made the leather incredibly soft. And so we used to gather that up and sell that. And awful existence, right? In terms of having to collect this stuff. I mean, absolutely awful. But nonetheless, it is what it is. Maybe this stuff can sharpen swords if we really wanted to go that far, if we want to go that in depth in our world creation. So for me, again, the notion of building a monster, of building a creature, is about these fascinating little journeys that you can go on and go, well, yeah, maybe there's some, well, White Tiger says maybe there is a little treasure trove of bits of precious metals or gems that were not digested. Could very well be. Let's see what's happening on YouTube. Has everyone, I've been banned by now. So it's halfway to thermite. It could be used as an explosive. So yes, let's see. Seems more like something where you would follow the chain like Indians and buffaloes, nomadic Indians, that is. Absolutely, yes, correct. So yeah. It's an interesting one. I see there's a lot of discussion going on about cats. Yes, I think there would be a lot. There is. That makes sense. Xander says, I want there to be a giant iron T-Rex in those Badlands. It would be terrifying. It really would be terrifying. Okay. The Great Stink was a thing in London. Absolutely. So was all of the things that came with it. So we have to worry about that too. Perhaps they dig... Okay, Lawrence Carnarvon has been on this idea for a while now, which is absolutely true. If you've ever ridden horses, this is a major problem. If you've ever ridden in a Land Rover whilst driving over the savannah of Africa, and you're perched on the back of the Land Rover, sitting on a spare tire, and you've been driving at a significant speed because you're chasing a pack of wild dogs, or I forget... No, it was a pack of antelope called hartebeest. They're sort of like a reddish antelope with a funny sort of horn configuration. Anyway, you will know that the holes that aardvarks, that anteaters, and that pangolins make can be incredibly dangerous, because you're walking along on a nice big flat field and suddenly there's a hole and you've fallen into that hole. So certainly, Lawrence Carnarvon, the large holes they dig could end up being traps. I don't think, though, that it would make sense that they dug these traps to trap explorers in the hopes of getting metal. I think that would be a bonus for them. I think they would be digging those holes to find rock that's been covered by sand that has a high metallic content to them. So I think that could be something that would be quite interesting. We could add in, if we really wanted to, something like, say, iron beetles, which are little scarab-like beetles that have an electrical discharge. And so they could, fly around with little blue sparks that light up the night. Very pretty. But they burrow in the sand during the day, and these things dig down for them. So we could certainly do that too. I do think, though, that, these are wonderful, and these are things that you can use to make your world feel more alive. Think about all this information. Unless the player in your game is playing a druid, and even if they are, you describe this chain of pangolin, and the guide turns to them and says, they make good armor, but very tough to hunt. We should avoid, and I suggest you wrap your armor in leather so they don't smell it, otherwise they will be drawn to its scent. That's probably the extent of the engagement that the players will have. If the player has a druid and they're like, oh, I want to find out about that, then we could definitely go, and you've got enough now to be able to talk about them for an hour and 24 minutes. Okay, an hour at least, if you really needed to. So let's see, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? What are we going to be doing? So Matthew Downs is voting for sand sharks, super predators. Tremors 3, for example, is a wonderfully terrible movie night. Tremors 3. Oh, God. Last night, I don't know what happened. What was I doing last night? I was preparing. I was working on this sci-fi world, and I was watching Amazon Prime, as one does. In these days, what was it? The Magic Sword came up. Now, the Magic Sword starred Basil Rathbone. Now, Basil Rathbone was most famous for playing Sherlock Holmes in an American film called Sherlock Holmes in about the 1950s, 1960s. He was part of that group of B-grade actors, and I say that with affection, but he was part of that group of B-grade actors who had a very long aquiline face, massive hooked nose, long thin cheekbones, and basically just looked like a bloodhound without the ears, although in his case he had the ears too. So I was particularly fond of Basil Rathbone. It's Basil Rathbone, Vincent Price. From that side of the pond, and from the UK side of the pond, it was Christopher Lee, Count Dooku or Saruman, and Peter Cushing, Grand Moff Tarkin, who they were kind of comparable if you could look at it that way. Anyway, so they showed me this magic sword. Now, the magic sword is a typical example of what happens when people have money and they pay for their own movies to be made, and then they try and be in their own movies as well, and then they try and pull in an A-list actor, or in their case, a B-list actor. It's very interesting. If you have Amazon Prime and you have access to watching The Magic Sword, it is at no point entertaining. It's incredibly campy. It's a horrid American production where they're all pretending to be European because it's a fantasy world, right? And what's delightful about it, though, is the character that Basil Rathbone plays is the sorcerer who abducts the princess because he wants revenge. He's going to feed her to his two-headed dragon, which is awful puppetry stuff, right? But it's wonderful. He's fought against, I should say, by Sybil, the witch, who can't remember how to make potions and stuff, but she does the traditional Eye of Newt, Root of Mandrake, and that sort of thing. So that's quite fun. And then there's the whole prince saving the thing. So if you want something to watch that is not going to do anything other than pass an hour and a half and maybe get you to giggle every now and again, as you're like, oh my God, this is terrible, but which is an excellent example of an adventure, by the way. A very straightforward adventure. Very, 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 very straightforward adventure. But it's a very interesting one. So go and have a look. See what it does. Because it's like, here is the plot. Okay. And the whole thing is structured around 7 curses of Lodak. And to go 7 curses. Wow. All right. So that took 10 minutes per curse. Oh my God, this is a long movie. But it's an interesting one nonetheless. From that perspective. Okay. A Ferrosaurus Rex. Okay. I think we're on the Ferros. We're generally drifting towards making another monster. I mean, we've got half an hour. Why not? It's good enough to be on MST3K. I don't know what that means, Jimmy James. Right. Black Shield of Falworth. Is that a movie? I must check that out. I will be doing a whole bunch. That's all I do is in the evenings. It's like a chill down. All right, let's just watch one of these old movies from the 50s or the 60s, somewhere around there, and we can look at it there. Talk about manure is nothing to a lot of my mum and my dinner discussions. There we go. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why not? Let's talk about dung. How much does the hour of world building with you plus the use of the map program Kaora cost? How much does the hour of world building with you plus the map program? Well, Kaora hand drew the map in Photoshop, so you'd have to speak to him about that. I know he does. I know he used to take commissions. I don't know if he still does or not. Yes, so there we are. How much does an hour cost of world building with me? Nothing. You just have to tune in, and here I am every Saturday. Watch24 says Europe is fantasy. Well, look, I mean, I think the reason why a lot of people assume that the European accents are fantasy is because of entrenchment, right? So we think pirates all speak with an R because of the particular actor who played a pirate in the 1960s film Long John Silver. He had that accent, and so we've assumed that's what pirates sound like. Meanwhile, they didn't. Again, I think it's an assumption. You know, when you say elf, we think of Lord of the Rings elves, which are all very, 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 very hoity-toity, namby-pamby sort of English, for lack of a better word. I mean, they really are, and that sort of thing. That's certainly in my mind. I mean, and what we used to find, or especially with the magic sword, and I think the reason why I mentioned that so specifically is because the hero is joined by 6 knights, one from Spain, one from Italy, one from France, one from Ireland, one from Scotland, and I don't know if we ever learnt where the other one came. I think he wasn't from Germany. Anyway, these poor American actors, who are not actors at all, were trying to put on these accents, and they were worse than mine, and that's saying something. So, anyway, right. Laura Lepine says, Kara said in an earlier stream that he doesn't do commissions from individuals. Well, there we go. So, yes. Right. That's where we are. Watcher 2470 says, so I'm an elf or a dwarf. Oh, well, maybe. Maybe you could be. Okay, White Tiger wants some advice. Go for it, White Tiger. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing. I don't know if we're going to be doing anything else for tonight. I mean, we're kind of getting to the end of it, right? Is the Badlands a desert, says Carl Volmorans. We haven't completely locked it down yet. I kind of imagine it being something like the Karoo. The Greater Karoo, as a matter of fact. Very flat and very rocky, very dry, vast areas of nothing, and then suddenly a plateau, and then nothing. Something along those lines, I would say. Or the mesas of New Mexico. Is it New Mexico where the mesas are? Those great, big, wonderful, wonderful rock formations. Very red, full of iron rock formations. Vikings, evil Vikings from the north. Well, I mean, look, in the case of the Vikings, it really is, that's where they came from. So, but yes. Right. Let's see. Any other questions or anything along? Villains often have an English accent. Absolutely. Well, I mean, poor old Janet was talking about it on her stream as well. She's like, well, the upper class English are often seen very much as the villains. And again, that's straight up typecasting that we have seen. from Hollywood. George Lucas unashamedly did that for Star Wars. If you are Imperial, if you have an English British accent, then you are definitely evil. Whereas if you're American, you're a Jedi and fighting for good, right? So I mean, that George didn't even try to hide that. It was just, that was it, straight up. So there's something for shorthand of that nature, right? Okay, so there's a question. I want a race to have a Minnesotan accent. So I think the moose, I know there are moose in Minnesota. I wanted to see one actually when I was there, but Game Master's Vault kept frightening them away, possibly because they were worried he was going to cook them for lunch. And he would do such a good job too. He's such a good cook. Anyway, I don't think he's watching anymore, so it's fine. I can say those sort of things. Okay, so this is not so much on world building, so let me go to this here so you can all see it. So White Tiger says, my players consist of a merfolk prince, a centaur chieftainess, a bugman butler to said chieftainess, and a fairy prince. Anything different from normal I should do for my players during our sessions? Well, that's interesting. That is interesting. It's a very mixed bunch, and it's a very mixed bunch of very disparate things. The Bugman and the Centaur won't want to go near water, in my opinion. I know horses can swim. I have spent many years with horses and haven't noticed many of them voluntarily rushing into water to go paddling about. Something to do with having hooves, really. So that's going to be tricky. The centaur automatically makes things tricky because they're a large animal, right? They're a large creature. So buildings and things are going to be tricky for them to get into. The one thing that you do have, the commonality, of course, is that there's nobility running through their veins across the board. So playing on that, I would say would be an option for you, is looking at more politically intrigue-based games where, and this is something that happens a lot, I know. When you have people who are of a certain rank or birthright, they get invited or told things that the lower classes wouldn't get told because there's a certain amount of, well, it's us versus them, and I can confide in you because you're a royal. So you'll understand these sort of things when I say that the peasants are absolutely awful, just uneducated masses. But you being a prince and all, you'll understand when I say that. We're kindred spirits. So there's that kind of mentality. I've seen that across the board. It's generalizing and stereotyping, yes, absolutely, but that is something that you could look at. So I would explore it that way as well. Otherwise, I would look at what their backstories are and try and focus on that. My characters, by the way, had from the session 0 of the sci-fi game, the very first meeting that we had, they said, okay, we've got to work out our relationships. We've got to work out our relationships with each other. Why are we together and why are we going to stay together? And I really, really appreciated that. They really drove that quite emphatically, as a matter of fact. And I said, okay, all right, well, let's start working through this. And they started to tell the story. And because it's on a starship, there is a captain. And the captain was like, okay, well, I think this is how I got the ship. And I like how he got the ship because it's given me as the GM a huge amount of information. A huge amount of information. I won't tell you how he got it because it will come out in the actual live plays. But he got a huge amount of information for me as the GM to be able to use. So he gets this ship. Then they went on to the next player, and the next player was sort of looking for angles, trying to figure out how it was going to work. And we brought up the map of the quadrant that they're based in the space lane, and worked out, well, if he had got the ship there, he would have flown in that direction to get sort of in that area, could have picked up your character. There's your character's backstory, link that in, and then from there it flies somewhere else to pick up the next character. And then we realized, hang on a moment, the last player could actually have joined right at the beginning and then moved through. So that could have worked. Watcher 2417, are we doing a little teaser of tomorrow's Q&A? Yeah, a little bit. But today I must admit, I was unsure as to what the best approach would be for today's session. Should we cancel it? Should we postpone it? Should we change it? I know Kaora is busy streaming at the moment. So do we want to cause you guys to have to choose who to watch, or have both windows open so you can watch both at the same time? These were some serious questions going on in my head that you guys don't see behind the scenes. So I kind of think that's where we are now. So I mean, we've got a couple of minutes. So the guys kind of put together this backstory, which I think works really, really, really well. What I did do, though, and I haven't released this yet into the Discord channels or wherever it's going to end up, with the Tri-Fi system, as you build your character, your backstory gets built for you. You can always change it. It is not a rule that you have to keep it. But as you level up, or as you create your character, your backstory is created as a paragraph. And by the time you finish creating your character, you've got a page worth of backstory. So if you don't want to create a backstory, or if you want something to base your backstory on, it generates, I think, quite an exciting backstory. And the guys were using it. And when they sat back, they were trying to say, how do we link these together? How do we link these backstories together? How do we link our stories together? And how do we make our own story? And the emergent story that they told was wonderful, was absolutely brilliant. So definitely something to look out for. I'll try and develop that a little bit further. Oh, there could be a sneak peek at something very exciting that's coming up. Now, I'll talk about that a bit later on. Let's just say that Dungeon Fog and I have partnered even more than we normally do. So some exciting stuff for next week, but we'll get there. All right. Now, Matthew Down says, how do you begin to gather, attract, and pass out players that will stick around and play on the regular? Matthew, this question was actually asked the other day, and unfortunately the answer is you just have to keep looking. For my sci-fi game, I had a player from months ago. We've been trying to get this game together, putting together players, putting together the team, and we've had players dropping out. And it's not for, as far as I'm aware, it's not for any other reason than real life. We had a player drop yesterday from the session 0, about an hour before the session 0 started. I got this message. The player was distraught. It was too much for them. There was too much stress and anxiety and the whole situation about life. And that's what happens to us. It happens to us. I'm in a game myself where when I get stressed out, I go, oh, it's too much. I don't want to be in it. I don't want to be in it anymore. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much. Some people, it's too much, and then they just have to step away. And we have to respect that they're going to step away, and that it's absolutely fine for them to do that. Personal mental health comes first before anything else. So it is difficult. I do think that something that you must do is make sure that the culture of every player at the table is aligned. So it's not so much about how do you find people who aren't going to leave. It is more a question of how do you find people that think the same way that you do. So if you haven't, by the way, the Web Goblin has been reforging, to use World Anvil's phrase, the RPG table finder. And he's been making it look slicker and easier. And one of the fundamentals in that is that once you've created your table and you've invited people to join your game, or people have asked to join your game, is you can talk to them in a little chat within that table space. And that entire reason is so that you can speak to people and say, well, what do you do for a living? Well, actually, I'm a this or I'm a that, and I'm a fighter pilot for a very active military, and so I'll be able to play once every 6 months. And you go, whoa, okay, wow, all right. Probably not going to be great for having at the table. On the other hand, someone who goes, well, I work on oil rigs and I'm here for 6 months, and then I will be going home for a month, but I will then be at home for a month and I have internet, they might be a bit of a better bet. It is also curious, by the way, because the Web Goblin was demonstrating to me all of the new features of RPG Table Finder. And he brought up the profile of when you create your profile online. And we randomly chose a couple people that were online to have a look at. Because we have a problem where people say, well, I can't find a game in my area, because it narrows it down to your area. If you were looking for around the table, of course, if you're going online, which most of us are these days, then it's a different story. And then we looked at the profile, and the person's profile was incomplete, or they'd filled it in as education, no thanks, race, the lost Yeti of Akatan, or I don't know. I mean, I don't remember what the Game Master's Vault filled in on his profile, but it was awful. It was just useless information. They were either trying to be clever, or they just didn't want to share that information. But then they complain when the search engine doesn't work based on the parameters of the information they've been given. So it's about making sure that when someone tells you some information, you say, okay, cool, well, let's interrogate that. So I think it's just questioning. I think it's really just questioning. And when someone does leave, is just to go, you know what? Real life comes first. I completely understand. No hard feelings. Let's move on. Okay, you see, I just do this every now and again, drop in Game Master's Vault just to see if he's listening or if he's kind of not listening. Anyway, I think it's because I reminisce about our time spent together writing the last book. The next one is getting there. So, okay. Any more questions? Torben BK says, last time you had a World Anvil expert in your stream. Yes, he will be back. He will be back. I asked a question there also, but never got an answer. So I can hope it's okay. I can ask again now. Torben, go for it. Ask now, please. Ask now, and hopefully I will see it. So yes, please, definitely do that. Okay, before I ask Xanders, let's go to Twitch. I'm currently in the chapter Nemesis in your first book. I wanted to know what you think of a Nemesis that is a combination of the Never-Present and Mentor. An example would be Senator Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars series. So, all right. That's an interesting one. Let's start with the idea that there's three types of nemesis. There's three types of bad guys, ultimate villains. The Never-Present, the Blunt Force, and then the Mentor. Now, the Never-Present is the nemesis that's never there and that the players are unaware of. So, yes, Anakin Skywalker, by and large, was unaware that Palpatine was evil and was corrupting him and driving him to become a Sith. So you could say he was never present. He was actively working against the party. Now, I haven't seen the Clone Wars series, so this is on conjecture primarily, but it's sort of filling in the blanks, right? He was a mentor as well. Absolutely, he was a mentor to Anakin Skywalker. So he did fulfill that sort of dual space. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but when you look at Palpatine as the enemy in the early movies, Phantom Menace, etc., and in the Clone Wars, he was a particularly bad enemy. He was a particularly bad nemesis. And there's a reason for it. Is because to Anakin, he wasn't a nemesis. He was never a nemesis. He was just a mentor. So don't think of Palpatine as a nemesis for Anakin Skywalker. Anakin didn't fight against him. There was no active resistance, which is one of the reasons why I feel those films are so weak from a narrative structure. Who was fighting against Palpatine? No one. So Palpatine was a never-present nemesis that never became present. And for me, that is the weakest of the entire chain in the series. Because if the series had started that way, and then the films with Luke Skywalker had been Luke actively working against the Emperor, which he wasn't, then it would be a stronger series. Or if the series had started with Leia being more pivotal, then it would have made more sense. But there was a lot of confusion that happened in that series, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for it. But Palpatine was not a nemesis to Anakin. At best, he was a nemesis to Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, because they were fighting against this unknown force that was causing the Separatists to do their thing, and the clones and. So it's a difficult situation, and yeah, even in Revenge of the Sith, where Yoda suddenly realizes that Palpatine is the big evil. Look at the next 3 films. What is Yoda doing to defeat Palpatine? Nothing, really. He trains Luke reluctantly. Now, you could say that was a charade to get Luke to want to be trained as a Jedi, where he goes, too old he is. Does that mean that Yoda gave up? Anakin beat him, and then Yoda just went to Dagobah and was like, I'm out. Done am I. Over. Anyway. That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different kettle of fish. So, in that sense, Palpatine is not a nemesis to Anakin Skywalker. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Oh, Game Master's Vault is working on game stuff. Game Master's Vault games are so cool, by the way. He has everything planned out, and he just runs them with this quiet calm of someone who's planned everything. So really, 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 really cool. And I'm interrupting him in his planning. Okay, right. Before we finish off, let's see. Any questions on YouTube? Yes, Senathen says, I have a very dark and grim campaign going right now, and my players have become really attracted or attached to their servants, but I plan on killing them. How do I ease into that without upsetting them? Well, there's 2 options. There are 2 options here. Don't kill them all at once. That's an option. Let 1 or 2 of them escape. So if the big bad is going to attack their servants and they have a couple servants, kill off 1 of them. Let 1 of them die as the PCs arrive. So it's a tragic moment. Look, there is another. You can do that, and then let some of them survive. And the reason why they must survive, but barely survive, and make it a quest that the PCs have to go on to keep them alive. Maybe they've been poisoned by your big bad, and the poison requires them to go and hunt iron pangolins or the Letamago in the Pharos Badlands. And we know that they have this particular acidic content to their stomach that's needed for the potion. Whatever. In that instance, that's how you should do it, I think. If you really are unsure how your players are going to react, don't kill them. Have them severely wounded so that when they arrive, there's a chance that they could be saved, but there's also a chance that they could fail and those servants die. So either way, make sure that the monster, the villain that kills these servants, is somebody that the party can get at, and make sure that the party knows who did it. Emphatically, without any ambiguity. It was a cloaked stranger. Nobody saw who did it. And there's no clues whatsoever. Don't do that. That will frustrate the players. They won't have a target to take out their anger on. And they need to be able to have that. They need to have a clear line of sight. They can go and do this. Bear in mind, if your world has resurrection or something along those lines, that might be the course they choose to take instead. They might go down on that pathway, in which case be prepared for it, that they're going to go and try and find a priest to bring back their friends. So keep that in the back of your mind as well. Another suggestion from Lawrence Carnarvon. Some of the biggest pangolins, or the Letamago, dig holes so large that some tribes repurpose them as mines. I don't see why not. I think that's brilliant. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So there we are. Matthew Downs says that sulfuric acid is highly useful. It very much is. It becomes the assassin's friend of disposing of bodies. Not particularly good with disposing of bodies, by the by. There are other things that work better, but you can still use it to dispose of bodies. Okay. Did Torben BK actually ask the question? I had to split the question. Wait, I'm going to go and look for that because now it's bothering me. Okay. No, wait. Last time you had well done. Yes. Okay. Then we said ask your question. And Ben Nicholson says, question, what is the next book? The next book is a complete guide to aerial campaigns. And interestingly enough, the Sci-fi system that I'm using for my sci-fi game, I implemented the one mechanic into it of altitude being a factor, how to keep it simple, but make it still useful and effective so that one can actually say, well, if I'm flying on a magic carpet and I dive bomb onto a ship or a flying sky whale, what advantage do I get from attacking perpendicularly? So we started to implement those rules. It was really good to test it out and to see. There was confusion from the players' behalf. Complete disclosure here. They were like, wait, is it this? Is it that? I can't figure it out. The diagram I used made sense in my head, but not in theirs. So I now have a new diagram, which I think will work even better. So I will be testing that out. So that's the next book, A Complete Guide to Aerial Campaigns. The focus of that book is quite literally airships, aerial creatures, aerial playable races. Not a lot, but definitely that. So it's going to be air combat, how to run aerial campaigns, obviously like nautical campaigns, airships, air creatures. There's three categories of of flying things, basically. There's natural flying things, so sky whales and birds and giant birds and that sort of thing. There are magical creatures like flying sky whales. No, I'm joking. Magic carpets, broomsticks, all those kinds of wonderful things. And then there are the constructs. So hot air balloons, hang gliders, airships, giant flying airships, zeppelins, etc., etc., etc. And then lots of air monsters. So nautical campaigns, I fully realized people wanted to have monsters statted out rather than to be told how to be able to make your own monsters. Airships will have that solved. So there you are. Right. Jimmy James question. Did you ever do videos about co-DMing? I'm trying to run a game with two other DMs and it's an interesting experiment. Any tips or tricks? One of you should be the narrative DM, one of you should be the rules DM, and the other one, if you want more, should be the record-keeping DM. I know it's awfully boring, but that is fundamentally the way that it should work, and if you want to keep it exciting, the three of you can change out. So for an adventure, one of you is the narrative GM, you tell the story. The other is the rules GM, which will make all the rules calls. So you guys have sat through, you've worked out your adventure. The rules lawyer is going, okay, cool. There's one section where you want to talk about a character doing a somersault and landing on the back of a troll and stabbing it in the ears with 2 daggers. Where does that come from, I wonder? That GM will do the research on that particular rules call. I know you can't anticipate those sort of things, but they will be the one that you turn to for rules. And the narrative GM, by the way, doesn't interfere. They let the GM do their job. And then the note-taking GM is the one who's making all the notes about the NPCs or has NPC notes available. So if you're using something like World Anvil, for example, when the PCs say, well, remember that tavern we went to 6 months ago and 300 sessions ago? I want to go to that tavern keeper and talk to him. Okay, what's his name? Okay, well, here's his name. I've got all the information for you. So that's how I've done it before in the past, and I think that's the best way to do it. Okay, Torben BK says I've had to split up the question. Yes, okay, just ask the question. Ask the question. 4 minutes. Dekrishka says, some of my players have way more character backstory hooks than the others. Can you give me a tip on how to prevent the others to feel left out? Well, look, again, this is why in my role-playing system, I created a way in which the character... They are copying and pasting paragraphs to make a backstory that will give you as the GM tools that you can then mine out of those. A character has even the smallest of backstories. I grew up with a normal family in a regular city. I trained under a master to become a weaponsmith or a wizard or whatever. There is still a huge amount of data in there. So players who have limited backstories, ask them after the session, hey, I wanted to talk to you about your backstory. You know, you said here that you grew up on a farm. Give me 3 names of people from that farm. Who was your friend on the farm? What was the name of your dog on the farm? And who was your enemy on that farm? So you can go mining for it if you really want to. The most important thing, and again, I think this was actually in this week's video, was to make sure that everybody is equally treated. That's a big, big ask for a lot of GMs. I've struggled with it myself. I have some players who are wonderfully creative, and I just want to mine them for everything that they give me as the game master. And some of them are like, you roleplay because you enjoy, you like the story, but you don't like making the story. And you have to be prepared for that. So then you've got to go and find it. So I always ask them questions. You can just do that. Okay, did Torben ask the question? Now? Yes, now. Okay, well, Torben, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. Same time, same channel, because we've got 2 minutes left. So unless you type it in now. Did it again? Wait, what? Torben, not seeing it. Can't you all see it just for chat logs up? No, can't see it, Torben. Cannot see it. So, don't know what you're doing there, mate. But it ain't working. So, Torben, okay, here we go. Did you do a tutorial on how to use all like path descriptions? Because I love on now, but I am close to go pay for World Anvil, but love to know more about the different things in detail. Did you do a tutorial on how to use all? Okay, so... Oh, OneNote. OneNote. I have never used OneNote. I've never used OneNote. I don't even know what OneNote is. I'm awfully backwards when it comes to tech. I use Word, Notepad, and World Anvil. That's what I use. So I cannot compare the to a OneNote. I cannot compare the to a OneNote. In terms of how to use World Anvil, there are many tutorials. I have done a lot of tutorials on World Anvil in terms of the creative aspect and what you should be thinking about. And I know worldanvil.com and the World Anvil YouTube page, they are doing a lot of tutorials on how to do that. I also know that part of what they're doing moving forward is a primer, if you like. It's like how to get started within World Anvil. And here are some things. So I've been speaking a lot with them. We have a meeting every week, as a matter of fact. I meet with World Anvil and with Dungeon Fog to talk about alignment and where they're going. And they basically give us insight into what's coming up. And we can probe and question and say, well, what about this? What about that? So, yes, I don't. In terms of what have I used, I know that there are other world builders out there and that sort of thing. I haven't experimented with them a lot. I'm very bad at note taking. I'm very bad at world note taking, as Game Master's Vault can attest to. He, I think, knows more about my one world setting than I do because he's taken notes and that sort of thing. I generally kind of store it in the back of my head. That's why I like World Anvil, because it prompts me, hey, who is the this and the this and the this? And I go, oh, but that's easy. I know that. Yeah, I know that, but nobody else does. So is it worth getting? It's free. So I would get it and experiment with it, play around with it and see. And if you do like it and want to get a subscription to it, that's fantastic. And then you get access to all kinds of amazing features. I mean, I've done a whole bunch of videos on that sort of thing. So there's timelines and family trees that they've added recently. So there's a lot going on there that you can really use. But again, it's about whether you need it or not. So like with the pangolin that we did tonight, it prompted us for some really awesome stuff. And how to put this politely, but if you are someone who doesn't have a lot of experience of coming up with stuff on the fly, if your general knowledge about wildlife or architecture or history is not strong, then World Anvil is really good for that because it prompts you and it says, hey, what's the ecology like of the creature? You go, what the hell's ecology? Let me go and look that up. Let me go and learn about that. I will never forget one of the most influential books that I have ever read. one of the most influential books I have ever read is by Gary Gygax. It's called Master of the Game. And it was written by one of the creators of Dungeons & Dragons and arguably one of the founders and the catalysts for role-playing in general. And in it, it was written in the 80s, before we had the internet, was a list of books that you should read in order to become a good GM. And they covered the course. It was everything. It was architecture. It was history. It was weaponry. It was biology. It was zoology. It was just massive reading list. And in South Africa, I actually did a video on it, I think, on my library that I had built and that I am now rebuilding, having relocated here. But that library was filled with all this stuff. You don't have to worry too much about that if you then use the templates, which are prompting you to add that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see what Twitch is saying, and then I'm going to say good night to everybody. So Grizzle says, one quick review of the Iron Pangolin before we go. I can open up the Iron Pangolin before we go. I've got it right here. So we'll open up the Iron Pangolin when we get there. I'll show that to you. If I may, there's also the World Anvil Discord. Yes, absolutely. Hefe points out the World Anvil's Discord, without a doubt, will help you. Absolutely. Game Master's Vault. I saw Guy's notes for one of his sessions. All it said was sexy goblin. Yeah, baby. Sexy goblin, without a doubt. My notes, for those that don't believe him, there are my notes, and I'm going to keep them moving around so you can't really read them. It's half a page and a coffee stain written on the back of a delivery of a box from Japan. That's my notes on the characters' backstories for 4 players. Yep. And also the entire adventure that they were going on for that session. And some rules that I have to add to the rulebook. So there we go. But, like I said, that's how I'm used to operating. And when I look at this and I see that it's a dwarvish freighter that's been marked with isodesium, and the name of the freighter is the Tradash, and the captain's name is Loch Larg, I should say. Anyway, so there we go. But this would now be transcribed into something like World Anvil if I was going to be doing that. But this is a Session 0 adventure, so one doesn't necessarily have to do that. Okay, so there is our Letamago, the Iron Pangolin. I love how it does all this layout for us. I mean, it's all automatically done. So cool. They're all my footnotes. As you can see, I only work in footnotes. That's why people say, have you written a novel yet? Well, yes, but it's in like 1 or 3 word little footnotes. Like they go into the tavern, it's a cool tavern, barmaid, drinks, weird, wonderful green bubbling drink, makes your hair change, you know, it's that sort of thing. So there you are. Yeah, social, look at that. It's brilliant. A whole page just waiting. Now, we could put a nice big picture in there of the Iron Pangolin, actually. But yeah, it looks good. We've got body tint, coloring, marking, average length, uses, exploitation. It's very, very, very straightforward. Very nice. Very clean presentation, I think. Anyway, so that's it. All right, folks, that's it from me. Suggestion, can you do a video series on how to create various types of maps and how to connect them? I have done a huge amount of maps, map videos every 3 weeks, as a matter of fact. There was a video on how to make maps, from how to make a tavern to a church to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon was a recent one. Just head on over to the other YouTube channel. That's How to Be a Great Game Master. And you'll find all of those map videos there. Lots and lots and lots of them. And there are more coming up because of something that's going to be happening in the near future involving one of my sponsors who makes maps. But I'm not going to say any more than that. Anyway, so we will see you all tomorrow. We will see you all tomorrow. Well, maybe not all of you. It would be nice to see all of you. I mean, we did pretty well. I don't know what the final count is on Twitch. I still can't see where that number is. On YouTube, we got to 30 was our maximum number watching. So 28 at the moment. Twitch is still on 30. So Twitch, you guys win for tonight. You are going to, all of you on Twitch, you find, I'm going to do this again because I really had fun doing this, I must admit. I like these cards. You all get a eerily humming divine cross. It hums eerily, a cross, a crucifix that hums. Thanks to Dungeon Discoveries and Lawsmith for providing us with that deck of random curiosities. You get a humming crucifix. Twitch, that's what you guys get for tonight. Anyway, I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all again tomorrow night. Until then, it's late for me, but for you it might be just the beginning of the afternoon. Either way, I wish all of you the very happiest of gaming.